why do we care about FHA versus Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which do lend money? And there are two reasons that have come up in the last couple of years. In the last couple of years, we went from not seeing FHA at all, or very rarely in terms of giving association loans to unit owners, to FHA insuring approximately 30% of all loans in the United States. So all of a sudden, what FHA wanted became critical. The second part that is the most important thing that I'm going to say tonight, that probably this isn't important either, is that on February 1st, FHA's guidelines eliminate spot loan approvals for condominiums. Up to this point, if a unit owner wanted to borrow money and it was an FHA loan, the association would receive a 14-question affidavit. The last question, which we always told associations to answer unknown, was how many units are FHA insured, and typically the association would have no way of knowing that. On February 1st, spot loans disappear. What does that mean? What it means is that condominium projects have to be approved in total. So for example, if I were at the Elms condominium and I'm the first person on February 1st who's going to refinance or sell my unit, unless I go through a much more dramatic and expensive FHA process that in theory could cost several $1,000s, I'm not going to be able to sell my unit or get it refinanced. I think what that's going to do for all practical purposes is make condominium associations, based on the pressure from unit owners and from boards, go for FHA project approval, which then would be good for 2 years. The second buyer, so I'm John Smith, I buy the first unit, I refinance the first unit, I pay several $1,000s. The next buyer, plus or minus a couple of dollars, probably has a free ride. I think condominium managers, again, and this is the first time I've ever said this in 30 years of looking at Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and FHA requirements. The FHA guidelines are the first ones I've saw that have me convinced that condominium projects are going to have to get full approvals. 30% of the market is too many to ignore, and I don't think you can put the burden on one unit owner. So what happened with FHA? How did this all come about? In June 2009, FHA announced its guidelines, or its new requirements. It was met with major resistance by lenders, Community Associations Institute, and it's in the package, CAI's comment. CAI National, based in Alexandria, Virginia, prepared a white paper for FHA about all the reasons why the June guidelines, which were going to take effect on October 1st, did not make sense. The October deadline was extended to November 2nd. Right around November 2nd, they were extended again to December 7th, but with significant changes from the original June guidelines. The letter that came out on December 2nd with the new requirements is Mortgagee Letter 2009-46B. There were some temporary guidelines that have been put in place that we'll discuss that came out as Mortgagee Letter 2009-46A. The new guidelines gave two approval processes. One is the one that's always been the case, which is that HUD can directly approve FHA projects. The second, which is new, is, and that's HRAP. The second one, which is new, is DELRAP, which is Direct Endorsement Lender Review and Approval Process, where the local lender, if they're certified by FHA to give approvals, has the right to give approvals. What was very telling. The FHA had 2 conference calls for lenders between November 2nd and December 7th to try to explain what the new guidelines meant. I was on both calls, joined by 2,000 lenders from across the country on each call. Each one went for 4 hours. They ended up with 50 to 100 questions still in the queue when they had to end each call. There are many questions that still are revolving around what does all this mean and what do lenders have to do. But Patty tells me that no lender to date has done a direct endorsement approval of a condominium project. Everybody in the lending community is scared enough that they are going through HUD for the approvals. FHA eligible projects. Essentially in Massachusetts, it means any project that complies with Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 183A, the Condominium Act. So essentially all projects are eligible until we get to the ones that are ineligible, which are condominium hotels or condotels, timeshares or any kind of segmented ownership projects. I'm sure you deal with these a lot, houseboat projects. Multi-dwelling unit condominiums. I'm not sure what they are. I think they've been done in other parts of the country, but it's apparently units that are set up as multi-unit units. So it's one unit that contains 4 units. I've never dealt with them. I don't know if anybody in the room has, but those are ineligible for FHA approval and loans and insurance. All projects not deemed to be used primarily as residential. I'm not sure what that means until we get to the next slide. Next slide is FHA requirements are a minimum of 2 units. That actually is a big deal. We have a lot of 2 to 4 unit condominiums in Massachusetts. They were all ineligible for FHA approval until December 7th, 2009. 2 to 4s are now eligible. Right of first refusal is permitted unless discriminatory. That is also a big deal. Up until December 7, 2009, FHA immediately rejected any condominium association that had a right of first refusal, even if Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac would accept those loans. Some guidance on the commercial space. No more than 25% of the property's total floor area is commercial. When Patty gets into her presentation, you'll find out that's a little more liberal than Fannie and Freddie, which are at 20%. No more than 15% of the total units are more than 30 days past due in condominium fees. That, as I understand it, is becoming a bigger problem for a lot of associations in Massachusetts, and somebody before the program did mention a project where they were currently over 15% and they're automatically not subject to loans. They cannot get loans. Carol, was it something I said? She lasted 19 minutes. 19 more than in the last 30 years of speaking. Carol, the bar's over here, by the way. Pre-sales. Under the permanent guidelines, 46B, 30%, or under the temporary guidelines, at least 30% of the units have to be pre-sold in a new development. That becomes very significant with what the competition is offering, so to speak. Fannie and Freddie want 70% pre-sold. An increase from 50% in a new project. So you have 4 units, first phase of a new project, whereas before Fannie would, if 2 out of the 4 units were sold, would take the loan. Now they want to see 3 out of the 4 of the units sold. FHA will take 30%, so in this case it would be 2 units, but in a larger phase, it would certainly be significant in terms of, in a 10-unit phase, it would be 3 units